I'm glad to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation together. And so thank you for the introduction. And it is, I have a few prepared remarks, so I'll go through those and then we'll get into a little bit more interaction a bit later. But it is such a pleasure to welcome you here today and welcome everyone to Calgary. If you're from out of province, I should probably find out how many out of province folks do we have here. Wow, look at that. Almost half the room. That's fantastic. Welcome here. So you'll probably know that there's a bit of a difference in conservatism in Alberta than in other provinces. And let me maybe see if I can help to explain a bit about why that is, because I know you're discussing conservatism in our nation and the critical role of the West. And so when we talk about conservatism, we often focus on policies and politics, but the values that underpin our movement they were a people who came to a vast and open country with little more than the clothes on their back and the belief in their ability to build a better life here with their families. And that is a truly great nation-building project. They embraced the spirit of radical free enterprise and rugged individualism. They understood that prosperity was not a handout, but a harvest, a direct result of hard work and thrift, and a commitment to family and community. And keep in mind, we've only been established as a province since 1905, so a lot of the growth and development happened here over 120 years. And that's part of, again, I think the reason why we have a little bit of a different founding story. Not a historical footnote, it is a living, breathing part of our identity. It is the grit and innovation you see in our entrepreneurs every single day. And these values, fiscal responsibility, limited government, and individual liberty, are the very values that allowed the West to flourish. They're the reason why Alberta create jobs and grow our economy. It's just a matter of common sense. We are a province that proves that pro-growth, low-tax, free market policies are the path to prosperity. This, yeah, it is. And this prairie conservatism has always been about more than just numbers on a balance sheet. It is about a fundamental belief in the dignity of every individual and the power of communities to solve their own problems. It's about building a society where people are free not only to succeed, but are also encouraged to help one another when times get tough. We are a strong and free people, and we always stick together. The historical roots of these values run deep. The people who settled here faced immense challenges, harsh winters, vast distances, and a complete lack of infrastructure. They had to be self-reliant, but they also had to work together. And this balance between individual strength and community cooperation is the essence of prairie conservatism. It is a belief that the government's role is not to be a master, but to be a partner, to get out of the way so people can build their businesses, their farms, and their communities and take care of their families. Today, as we face new challenges, we have to go back to these foundational values. We have to continue to advocate for our people. We have to ensure that our industries, from energy to agriculture to the new industries in technology, are free to innovate and compete on the global stage. We are a nation-building province, and we must ensure we continue to build for the good of all Canadians. There have always been those who oppose free enterprise, who stand in the way of innovation and the standards of freedom and self-determination. They would rather choose winners in the name of a narrow and limited ideology that villainizes outsiders and preaches against prosperity. And the last 10 years have made that more evident than ever. If you didn't see the video that I released earlier this week, let me highlight some key points that I made there. We all know that Canada is suffering right now with its economy. The last few years have brought an unprecedented inflation crisis, high unemployment, declining GDP, plummeting productivity, and hundreds of billions in capital investment that has fled out Canada for other countries. A massive and unsustainable federal deficit, and of course the U.S. tariff threat, which has exposed just how dependent we are on one single country for the vast majority of our exports. It has been an extremely difficult period, and many don't seem to want to even recognize that there is a problem. But the good news is that with a few simple policy changes, the federal government could meaningfully reverse these trends. They could create hundreds of thousands of jobs, attract back hundreds of billions of dollars in investment, bolster GDP growth, diversify our trade markets, and create new revenue streams for federal and provincial budgets, all without the investment of new tax dollars. All that's standing in the way of that is some common sense and, it must be said, a bit of courage by our Prime Minister. Because more than a century and a half after those prairie homesteaders came to our land, one thing is still true. You see, Canada has among the largest supply of valuable natural resources on Earth. On a per-person basis, our endowment of natural resources far exceeds China and Europe and Russia and even the United States. And it's not even that close. We have incredibly fertile lands and oceans, unmatched supplies of timber, uranium, and potash, a treasure trove of critical minerals in every province, in every territory. And here in Alberta, we literally live on top of more than a trillion barrels of oil and more than a quadrillion cubic feet of natural gas. These oil and gas resources represent an incalculable tens of trillions of dollars of potential wealth for our country if we would just develop it. And if we do, that means hundreds of thousands of new great paying jobs, hundreds of billions in taxes and royalties that could be used for government services and infrastructure, and potentially trillions more in all of the spin-off industries that can develop, like AI data centers and petrochemicals, environmental technology, and a host of other industries that would benefit profoundly from the wealth generated from its development. But for the past 10 years, the federal government, led by Justin Trudeau, put in place a series of laws and regulations designed to target and phase out of existence Canada's largest economic sector, oil and gas. I know that in Ontario they think the auto sector is the largest industry. It's not, it's oil and gas. We have about $150 billion worth of oil and gas exports that go back and forth across to the United States. But first, how did they do this? They made new pipelines virtually impossible to build through the passage of the unconstitutional C-69. We call it the No New Pipelines Bill. It had so much confusion and uncertainty and red tape that Canada earned a reputation as one of the very worst places to invest in the world. They didn't stop there, though. The Liberals then specifically targeted what is possibly the most valuable single deposit of natural resources anywhere, and that's the Alberta oil sands. They completely banned all oil tankers off the northwest BC coast, effectively landlocking a multi-trillion-dollar asset that would have enriched the lives of Canadians for generations. And then to cap it off, the federal government announced an impossible-to-achieve oil and gas emissions cap, or more accurately, a production cap that makes new oil and gas production effectively impossible, and if they stay with the stringency they're proposing, would mean we would have to shut in up to 2 million barrels of production by 2035. So the funny thing about this particular emissions cap is that it wasn't imposed on any other type of production. It wasn't put on aluminum, it wasn't put on cement, it wasn't put on steel. The cap was placed on just one single sector, oil and gas. And the Conference Board of Canada just released a report, as I mentioned, that not only would the cap cost the Alberta economy roughly $1 trillion in GDP, 150,000 jobs, and $200 billion in provincial revenues by 2050, but it would also impact federal fortunes too. No other nation would ever think to do what Canada has done in the last decade and phase out its most valuable assets worth tens of trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of jobs for people. But there is one silver lining to these economic challenges. I think Canadians right across the nation are waking up to what has happened. We are now starting to understand that we have only been hurting ourselves. We are far too economically dependent on one customer. And if we want to be economically prosperous and independent again, we have to take advantage of the incredible endowment of resources that we enjoy. And it wouldn't take a whole lot to get that started either. I have often talked about the 9 bad laws. But let me just tell you the 3 that he could get started on right away that would immediately turn our nation's economic fortunes around. First, announcing that Canada would no longer be implementing the oil and gas production cap. That would send a clear signal that Canada wants to expand oil and gas production and reduce emissions through technology and innovation rather than by capping resource development. Second thing, we'd like him to announce that Canada will be repealing the oil tanker ban this fall. The federal government can then work with BC and Alberta and Indigenous leaders to build a new resource corridor and bitumen pipeline to ports in the northwest BC coast to access new markets in Asia, which is where the greatest growth opportunity lies. And third, announce an overhaul of the C-69 No New Pipelines law. And I raise these topics in this context today for one reason. That the spirit that united our nation from Tofino to Charlottetown would not exist under the rhetoric and ideology that has prevailed over the last decade in this nation. The nation that truly, the nation that built railroads across a continent could not have happened under the last 10 years. The Somme, Vimy Ridge, Passchendaele, the liberation of the Netherlands, those victories came from a belief in the natural freedoms of Canada and the strength of our values. And we need to find that again. We need to restore the spirit of the homesteaders. We need to remember the farmers and the miners and the fishermen, the builders of railroads and the navies and the warriors who looked apocalypse in the face. And stood firm. I am incredibly optimistic about the future of Alberta and Canada. We have a resilient economy, a hardworking population, and a shared commitment to building a prosperous future for generations to come. With that, let's get into a good conversation.
120th birthday to you. You're looking great. That's for all of you. That's not for Premier Smith. Big celebration, though. This is important.
It is important. You know, as I was going around to it was very interesting that our birthday, September 1st, happened to fall on Labor Day.
I saw you get some flack for that
on
social media.
But you know what? It actually is very telling because I don't think that there is a harder working people than the people of Alberta, and so we were able to tie those two together. It was a really good celebration, and it also it capped off. I was at a rodeo. It kind of capped off the rodeo summer. And when you think about why do we celebrate rodeo, well, it's fun to do. We get to dress up as cowboys, and we get to be able to enjoy some incredible competitive athletes. But it also harkens back to those Western values that I was talking about. We celebrate our Western values every single year, and it reminds us that we are different, we are special, and those same values, they just build into every person who comes here and wants to make a living and build a business and be wealth creators and job creators. So that celebration is really important.
Last time you and I did one of these fireside chats, it was in Ottawa. I opened up by asking you, how does it feel to be a traitor? Because that's what people were calling Premier Smith, I think wrongly, and I told you that at the time. Now I'd like to ask you what it's like to have all the people calling you a traitor adopt your recommendations, your policies. Your policies that got you called that are now in vogue.
Well, isn't the left funny, hey? That when a conservative politician says something, it's outrageous. But when the Liberal Prime Minister says something, oh my goodness, what a statesman. Isn't he being very reasonable in how he's approaching Donald Trump? Well, absolutely right. So I just can't believe that you have to tell me how the Eastern Liberal media is able to do those kinds of mental gymnastics, that they're able
I'm
to
the wrong guy to
completely go a 180 when the party that they tend to be aligned with says something, but they're immediately out there trying to criticize a conservative for saying the same.
Very similar to you speaking to Ben Shapiro, which I thought was very smart. You went down to Florida, talked to Ben Shapiro, and then, what happened the next day? He's speaking to his audience of 9-10 million people, telling them that the tariffs on Canada are a really bad idea and this shouldn't be happening. But you were pilloried for that. The Liberal cabinet was supposed to hear from the president of the Heritage Foundation and the guy behind Project 2025 this week, and CBC described that in the most, very nice tones. Isn't this smart?
Well, we met with the Heritage Foundation when Donald Trump first got elected because we knew that the Heritage Foundation was one of many different influential groups on him. And we wanted to understand what kind of policies he was advocating to see if there was some way that we could frame the way our talking points and our interests in terms of the U.S. president's interests. You probably also saw that they had to hire a high-priced consultant to teach them how to talk to Republicans.
But they were all Democrats.
This is the absurdity, I think, of what we see at the federal level. They were so in the bag for the Democrats that they didn't bother reaching out to find out who the Republicans were. I can tell you, we have a tremendous Washington office. It was led by James Rajat, now led by Nathan Cooper, and our approach has always been, you got to talk to the Democrats because if the White House has a Democrat in, they pull from the governors and the House of Representatives and the Senate from their side of the aisle. So you've got to meet all those guys. And then same in the reverse, you have to know who the future secretaries are going to be. They have not done any of that work in the United States at the embassy level, and so now they're playing catch up. Whereas I was on the air at the same time you were through Trump 1, and so I spent a lot of time studying this guy. I spent a lot of time trying to understand why he does the things that he does. I read his book. I read Lighthizer book. I even read a little bit about his favorite president, McKinley, so that I could understand what it is that he's trying to achieve. And that's far more powerful. Part of the reason I also talked to Ben Shapiro's audience is that I wanted them to stop talking as if Canada wanted to be the 51st state. And so I don't know if it got reported. May have gotten into trouble. Like these are people who flew across the country to go to this Purdue. Is it Purdue? Prager University. Prager University event. So these are some of the most well-heeled support.